Blood is one of those games. You may be wondering what I mean by that, and I'm happy to explain it. You see, in the taxonomy of video games, there are good games, bad games, okay games, and those games. Those games is a title that refers to games that have managed to transcend traditional qualifiers. They can't be classified as good games, not due to a lack of quality, but because there's so many good games that some just get lost in the waves. Blood may not have the exact same iconic status as something like Doom or Half-Life, but it sits right underneath them, just as worthy of a near-perfect score. Unlike many other classic shooters, Blood languished in a pit of copyright hell for years, meaning that most versions of the game available from online retailers didn't work that great on modern hardware. Eventually though, Night Dive Studios, the patron saints of retro shooters, did what they did best and remastered the game with fresh supply. Given that it's been a bit since I played the original, I decided to hop back in and give the game the YouTube treatment. So I hope you enjoy this video, but just a warning, there will be. Now, if you're a shooter fan, you already know what the build engine is, but if you're not a shooter fan, let me explain. Most early FPS games were made using either the Wolfenstein engine or the Doom engine, but in '95, a guy named Ken Silverman released a new engine called Build that was specifically made for first-person shooters. According to Wikipedia, the first game ever made for said engine was Rockin' Shaolin: Legend of the Seven Paladins 3D. It's a bootleg that came out in '94 that actually used the engine illegally. Because of this, it was only ever released in Taiwan and South Korea. I'm not going to go on a huge spiel about this, I just saw that while I was writing the script and thought it was funny. The build engine was never super widely used, but is most known for 3 games: Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior, and Blood. The biggest aspect of Build that distinguished it from games on the Doom engine was its much greater degree of interactivity with the environment. Things like destructible walls and scenery, as well as more advanced graphical capabilities. Most of the games on this engine didn't really make good use of any of this, but those 3 I mentioned earlier were famous for how much they took advantage of it. Shadow Warrior even had drivable vehicles. In Blood, the engine is primarily used in service of more advanced lighting effects as well as voxel models for weapon pickups and items. You want some 3D with your 2.5D? Yeah, I bet you do. Look at that fucking model, it's great. Oh yeah, we also got a shitload of particle effects, which is great for the copious amounts of internal organs that are going to be flying all over the place for the duration of the game. With all the technical details that I can actually comprehend out of the way, let's talk about the story. It's a 90s shooter, motherfucker, there is no story. Okay, I'm exaggerating slightly, there's a story set up. The gist is that you play as a dude named Caleb, a demonic gunslinger who serves Chernobog, a demonic god that has uncertain origins in pre-Christian Slavic paganism. Specific details about his appearance and place in Eastern European folk pantheons have eluded historians, so they just make up a bunch of shit in this game. Caleb works for Chernobog alongside 3 other individuals known as the Chosen. Gabriel, Ishmael, and Ophelia are the other 3. Nothing is said about these guys other than that Ophelia is Caleb's girlfriend, but other than that, nada. Chernobog betrays you and your buddies, killing them and burying you alive. Sometime later, in the 1920s, Caleb comes back to life and gives out the most badass opening line in video game history. I live again. Hell yeah. The most important part of any shooter is, of course, the guns. Blood might have the most creative arsenal among all of the classic shooters. Your starting melee weapon is a pitchfork, which has some reach on it. First gun is the flare gun, which is a cool substitute for the pistol. Instead of doing flat damage, it sets people on fire, which isn't instantaneous, so you have to be more strategic with it. Shotgun is by default the super shotgun because we ain't no wimps. It's great for blowing off zombie melons. Tommy gun for mowing down crowds, Tesla gun for bigger enemies, napalm launcher when you just want to blow up the whole damn world, spray can to get some extra crispy steak home style, life leech for nothing at all, don't use it sucks, and the voodoo doll for cheesing bosses to death. Longtime Blood veterans have probably been screaming at their monitors that I'm making a big omission, but don't worry, I know what I'm doing. There's one last weapon, the most iconic and satisfying one. The stick of dynamite. It's so simple, so crude, yet so satisfying. It blows up on contact, meaning that if you can get the arc down, this is probably the most effective overall weapon in the game and definitely the most fun. There's also remote and proximity bombs, but I never really use them. Now for shooters, I tend to use specific weapons for specific enemies. Shotgun for zombie, dynamite for zombies, plural, Tommy gun for people, spiders, rats, and the hand from Evil Dead 2. Really, I use the shotgun for most things. You use that secondary and this thing is just a workhorse. Probably the most useful against the screaming phantoms, the first one of which still jump scares me even though I've fucking played this game a bunch and it still catches me off guard. Speaking of the enemies, I'm playing on Fresh Supply as stated in the intro, which I've heard some people say has a few differences from the original. Being that it's been like 6 years since I last played this game, I couldn't really tell it was dissimilar, although I don't remember gargoyles spazzing out and flying all over the place at Mach 5 in the original. There's been a lot of contention over the years over what's the best way to play Blood. For most of the past 25 years, the consensus has been Blood GDX, an offshoot of Build GDX, which makes the game much more playable on modern systems. When I first played this game, I just said fuck it and used DOSBox, which isn't amazing, but worked well enough. I actually never touched Blood GDX until earlier this year when I played through Deathwish, which is amazing, by the way. There's also NBlood, which is built off the back of eDuke32, and Raze, which mixes the source code of a bunch of different projects, along with GZ Doom. I'm not very familiar with either of these, and I've seen debates about which is better get pretty contentious, so I'm going to refrain from commenting on either of these any further for the sake of my sanity. Part of why Fresh Supply was such a big deal is because unlike most other old shooters, the source code for Blood isn't readily available to the public. It wasn't ever officially released, and only unfinished versions of it can be found on the internet, meaning the project of developing both mods and source ports for it is more difficult than other games. I think it goes to show the dedication of the fanbase though, because this hasn't stopped people from spending years trying to get these projects off the ground. Blood has a pretty active modding community with a lot of fan-made map packs, expansions, graphical mods, all that sort of thing. One such mod, Deathwish, the one I mentioned earlier, is actually so highly regarded by fans of this game that when Night Dive was making Fresh Supply, they made sure it was compatible. I still use Blood GDX though, because when I tried to run it through Fresh Supply, it didn't have the music, so fuck that. But this video isn't about Deathwish, it's about the base levels, so let's talk about those. The game is divided into 5 episodes, each with a distinct theme. First episode, The Way of All Flesh. This one has a kind of rural theme, and it's probably the most iconic of all of them. Also definitely the hardest, since you don't have access to the full arsenal and ammo is more scarce than the other episodes. I'm a big fan of the train level here, but the carnival kicks ass as well. Next is Even Death May Die, which has a snowy Arctic vibe. Best level here is easily the Overlook Hotel in my opinion, really fun to tear through and you even get to meet Jack Torrance. Episode 3, Farewell to Arms. Got an urban setting here with some kind of war going on and shit blowing up everywhere. A few of these stages are a little too maze-like for me, with progression for you not being very clear, but for the most part this level is some good shit. Favorite here is probably the factory level. Episode 4, Dead Reckoning. This section is badass, just one long collage of movie references basically. Everything from Hammer horror films to Dawn of the Dead is represented here. You can tell the devs knew their horror films. Best of this batch in my opinion is easily this game's depiction of Camp Crystal Lake, where you can expectedly find Jason's iconic hockey mask and machete. Last set is called Post-Mortem, a collection of levels that were originally part of an expansion called the Plasma Pack. As far as I can tell, there's not really much of a unifying theme here, and it's more just a series of stages that aren't really linked together. They're all still really good though, but I like the opening level in the department store the best. Fresh Supply also comes with a 6-episode Cryptic Passage, which you have to launch separately from the others for some reason. I'm saving this one for later since it was made by a different developer and seems to be more of a bonus than anything. One of the great tragedies of Blood is that the sequel, inventively titled Blood 2, is probably one of the most disappointing follow-ups in gaming history. It had a really troubled development that was ultimately cut short before the devs could properly finish it, so it was released in a buggy, poorly balanced state to largely negative reception. As a result, the series had effectively committed suicide. That doesn't really matter though, as the first game is still one of the best shooters ever made, and has cemented itself as one of the paradigmatic examples of a cult classic video game, with a loyal fanbase that has made tons of mods for it over the years. It's unfortunate that Blood hasn't gotten the same revival that other classic FPS series have, but it's nice to see that it remains iconic among fans of boomer shooters who keep it alive to this day. Also, there's some manga that takes a lot of inspiration from it too, so there's that. I hope that now that Blood is more accessible to a modern audience, the fanbase surrounding it will only continue to grow, with more mods and other custom content coming out to draw even more attention to it. Who knows, maybe it'll be enough that we might even get a full revival of the series someday. That might be wishful thinking, but you never know with this sort of stuff. Either way though, thanks to Night Dive Studios, Blood lives again. Hey everybody, if you made it this far, I just want to say thanks. It means a whole lot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all your standard YouTube stuff that you always hear. And other than that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.